They would call him a monster, a butcher, a madman, but they would be wrong. This wasn't a fall from grace. It was an awakening. It all started the day this man walked out of the Imperial prison with a promise to himself. He would never kill again. It was a promise he would fail to keep. The irony is, his freedom began with another man's death, Emperor Uriel Septim. The Emperor had looked at him and didn't see a criminal. He saw a face from his dreams. He saw a chance, and therefore he gave this man one, a chance to be someone new. When he crawled out of those sewers and into the Cyrodiil sunlight, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. It was a fragile, flickering thing, but it was there. He had a name, but it felt like a curse. A history, but it was written in blood. He decided to leave both behind in the filth of that sewer. He would be a blank slate, known only as Whisper. And a Whisper was exactly what he wanted to be. His first shot at a new life was through alchemy. He thought, perhaps, by combining the restorative properties of mugwort and the calming effects of lavender, he could create a new life for himself, selling potions to the people of Cyrodiil. He spent his days in the market, purchasing ingredients and mixing them into various tinctures, then selling them back for a tidy profit. It was a simple life. He kept his head down, made money, made connections, but the nights were the worst. In his quiet, rented room, the silence would press in, and the old urges would start to whisper. The memory of a blade's weight in his hand, the quiet little sigh of a life being extinguished. He'd grip the bedsheets until his knuckles were white, his body trembling, fighting a war inside his own skin. His fragile hope was being ground to dust. He found himself frequenting a little tavern on the water in the Imperial waterfront, the Bloated Float, a dive by most definitions, where the poor and destitute of the waterfront could get their drink and waste away their days. It was here that Whisper encountered his destiny. Velen Andis was a lonely man, living a life of quiet solitude. He lived in the lighthouse, alone, and had unusual waking hours compared to the others. He would make for a tantalizing target. Nobody would notice he was gone. Nobody was waiting up for him. And by his own admission, the lighthouse isn't even necessary to the operations of the dock.
The lighthouse is mostly for show. You'd have to be an idiot to try to navigate here by night.
The whispering in Whisper's head turned into a scream. It was a hunger that had been starved for too long. He knew he had to feed it. So he journeyed to the lighthouse and staked out his prey. That night, when everybody else on the waterfront was asleep and nobody was in range to hear his screams, Whisper attacked. There was a short skirmish, but Whisper prevailed in the end. Whisper stood over him, his chest heaving, not with effort, but with an overwhelming sense of relief. The tension that had been coiling in his gut for weeks just unspooled. The world came back into sharp focus. It wasn't madness, it was a moment of absolute clarity. He wasn't fighting his nature anymore, he was accepting it. He didn't feel guilt, he didn't feel remorse, he just felt calm. He slept in the lighthouse that night, a strange ritual of his to lie in the bed of his victim, and he slept more soundly than he had in his entire life. When he awoke, he wasn't alone.
You sleep rather soundly for a murderer. That's good.
A figure stood in the shadows, cloaked in black. He was pale, with an unnerving stillness. His voice was a dry rasp, but it held a strange authority. Whisper wasn't afraid. For the first time, he felt like he was in the presence of someone who saw him not as a monster, but as a professional. He called himself Lucien Lachance, a speaker for the Dark Brotherhood. He said Whisper's deathcraft had pleased their leader, the Night Mother. He offered him a spot in their unique family. It wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. An invitation to stop fighting and become what he was always meant to be. To prove his worth, he was given a test. He had to go to the Inn of Ill Omen, find a man named Rufio, and kill him. Lucian handed him a small, wicked-looking dagger, the Blade of Woe. As Whisper's fingers closed around the hilt, it felt like coming home. The Inn of Ill Omen was a decrepit hole. The innkeeper was all too happy to point him to Rufio's hiding place in the cellar. Rufio was pathetic, asleep in his bed. He offered no resistance. It was less of a murder and more of a mercy killing. Whisper plunged the Blade of Woe into his heart, and it was done. His initiation was complete. He was no longer a drifter, an alchemist. He was an assassin. The next time he slept, Lucian returned. He welcomed him to the family, gave him the location of their sanctuary in Cheydinhal, and the passphrase.
Sanguine, my brother.
Walking towards that black door, Whisper felt no fear, only anticipation. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was the book he was always meant to write. Before we continue this story of death and betrayal, let me give you a quick rundown of the rules of this playthrough. And also let me apologize for the quality of my voice. I have a little bit of a cold right now, but I think it actually lends a little bit of darkness and mysterious edge to my voiceover for the script, so I'm running with it. This is the Unstoppable Slasher Challenge, and Whisper here is going to complete all of the Dark Brotherhood storyline in Oblivion Remastered. The rules are simple. No magic. This means no spellcasting, but also no use of enchanting tables. As I'm not engaging with the main story, that also means no sigil stones. So any enchanted items I use will have to be found in the world or given as quest rewards. There is one minor exception in that Whisper here is born under the sign of the Shadow, which gives him access to once per day invisibility. This is the only ability I will allow. Next, no ranged weapons, basically no bows. Whisper gets up close and personal with his targets. He likes to see the look on their faces as he deals the final blow. Specifically, he uses a dagger with no shield as his standard setup. This is just personal taste, but no ranged weapons was a hard rule for this challenge. Finally, I won't be using any item duplication cheats or other exploits. I use what I find and craft all my own poisons. If you're curious about his class, here's what I went with. Now, let's get back into the action, and if you're enjoying this descent into madness, go ahead and subscribe. There's plenty more blood to spill. The Cheydinhal Sanctuary was a den of shadows and secrets, a place outside the judgment of the gods, and for Whisper, it was home. The Brotherhood was a collection of misfits and monsters, each with their own brand of darkness. There was Ochiva, the stern Argonian matriarch, and Tainava, her brooding brother. Gogron, an orc who lived for the thrill of the kill, and Antoinetta Marie, whose cheerful personality was a thin veil for a chilling madness underneath. Mirage Dar, a Khajiit merchant and mage who had difficulty making new friends, and Telendril, whose duties kept her busy traveling. And then there was Vicente Valtieri, a vampire. He became Whisper's mentor. He saw the potential in him, the same cold fire that burned in his own undead heart. He taught Whisper that killing wasn't just an act, but an art form. It required patience, planning, and detachment. His first contracts were simple: a pirate captain on his ship. Whisper slipped aboard at night, a ghost in the fog, and stabbed him in the back. Another was an old man in his home. He was told to make it look like an accident. He waited until the man was resting in his favorite chair and just nudged a mounted animal head above him. Gravity did the rest. Each kill was a lesson, honing his skills. He was no longer the animal who had sliced and diced the lighthouse keeper. He was becoming a scalpel. He bonded with this dark family. They'd share stories of their kills in the sanctuary, their laughter sharp and humorless. They were bound together by a shared understanding of the world's true nature, that life is fragile, and they were the ones chosen to break it. Whisper maintained a home of his own in the Imperial City, his own private sanctuary, away from the sanctuary of his Brotherhood. Here he kept his macabre collection, the skulls of his victims, retrieved from their resting spots sometimes years later. But he also stumbled upon a more fitting secret lair for himself, Deep Scorn Hollow. Located far to the south near the city of Leowin, this abandoned refuge was once the lair of a vampire and member of the Dark Brotherhood. Whisper decided this was the perfect place to hide, so he built upon what he found and created the ultimate shrine to Dread Father Sithis. It was after a difficult contract, one that required him to fake a death rather than take a life, that Vicente made him an offer. He spoke of a gift, a way to truly shed the weaknesses of mortality, vampirism. He said it would grant him strength, speed, and a kinship with the night. Admittedly, Whisper had grown curious about vampires after spending time in Deep Scorn Hollow. For some, it's a curse. For Whisper, it was the next logical step. The monster on the inside was about to get a matching exterior. The transformation was agonizing. A fever burned through his veins, followed by a cold that settled deep in his bones. But when he emerged, he was more. The world was sharper, the shadows deeper, and he felt a new, gnawing hunger that perfectly mirrored the one he already had. He was reborn, again, a creature of the night in service to the Night Mother. His success didn't go unnoticed. Ochiva soon entrusted him with a contract requiring more subtlety. It was a test of cunning, not just his blade. 5 people were gathered at Summit Mist Manor in Skingrad, thinking they were on a treasure hunt. His job was to go in as the 6th guest, lock the door, and eliminate them all, one by one. The bonus, she said, was to do it without anyone realizing he was the killer, to turn them on each other. A whodunit, where he was the culprit, director, and sole audience. Summit Mist Manor was a stage, and Whisper was its hidden playwright. The 5 guests were his players. There was the young and beautiful Dovesi Dran, the foppish noble Primo Antonius, the gruff former soldier Neville, the irreverent drunkard Nels the Naughty, and the busybody aristocrat Mathilde Petite. A bickering, greedy, and gloriously gullible cast. As the doorman locked them in, a delicious sense of power washed over him. Their little treasure hunt had just become his playground. He decided to start by building trust, a tool more effective than any poison. He played the part of a fellow contestant, learning their vulnerabilities and fears. His first target was Dovesi. Sensing her infatuation with Primo, Whisper told her the target of her affections wanted to meet her in the privacy of his chamber. Her vanity won. She practically skipped up the stairs to her own death. As she stood in the empty bedroom, wondering where her suitor was, Whisper granted her the only embrace she would receive that night. One down, panic began to set in.
No. When I looked into Dovesi's face, it was like peering at my own daughter. I feel like I've lost her all over again.
While the others argued, Whisper slipped upstairs and found the soldier, Neville, asleep in his room. No Legion armor to protect him. It was a clean, silent kill. 2 down. Returning to the group, he spoke to Nels, who was beginning to let paranoia take over. Contrary to the beliefs of the other guests, Nels was not a simple drunk. He was no fool. He had already put together that the killer was not acting out of greed, but that it was a professional assassin, and that this whole party was a trap. He knew too much. It was time to remove the threat before it grew too great. While the others were searching downstairs, Whisper eliminated the only one who could have figured it out. 3 down. Now only 2 remained. The cowardly Primo and the greedy Matilda. Whisper approached Primo, a mask of terror on his face. He planted seeds of doubt, convincing the witless noble that Matilde was actually the killer, that she had been picking them off to claim the prize for herself. It was perfect. Primo, in a fit of terror-induced rage, confronted Matilde. He killed her himself. Primo stood over Matilde's body, relieved that he had survived this nightmare. He looked at Whisper, who stepped from the shadows. As Primo went off to rest, Whisper drew his blade. The manor fell silent. He hadn't just killed them, he had orchestrated their demise. It was art, his art. He walked out the front door, leaving the masterpiece for the Skingrad guard to find. His success at Summit Mist Manor elevated him, but with notoriety comes harder work. His next target was a retired city guard who was hunting the family, Adamus Philida. This wasn't some panicked party guest. This was a professional. Whisper tracked him to Leowin, learning his patterns. The man was clever and paranoid. He finally found his opening during the guard's solitary nightly swim. He slipped into the dark water, a whisper of death, with a freshly poisoned blade. It wasn't clean or elegant. It was a desperate, brutal struggle in the churning water. Furniture wasn't shattered, but the silence of the night was. The guard landed a solid blow that sent Whisper staggering back, but in the end, the assassin's resolve and his vampiric strength won out. As Philida's body went limp in the water, the city watch, alerted by the commotion, surrounded him and opened fire. He was trapped. But Whisper wasn't an ordinary man. He was a creature of the night. Using his vampiric powers, Whisper leapt out of the water and sprinted out the gate, slipping past the guards. He bolted into the forest and towards his secret lair, Deep Scorn Hollow, where he waited for the heat to die down. He completed the contract, but it was sloppy. A reminder that no matter how skilled you are, the world can still fight back. Now he had a bounty on his head, but that was no matter. Whisper had wealth from his lucrative business selling potions and poisons. He simply paid off the bounty and went on his way. When he got back to the sanctuary, Ochiva handed him a sealed letter. The wax seal was a black hand. It was from Lucien Lachance himself. His presence was requested at Fort Farragut. The fort was a ruin crawling with undead, a fitting home. Whisper found him in the deepest chamber. His demeanor was different. The calm, academic air was gone, replaced by a grave seriousness. Whisper had been given a task directly from a speaker of the Black Hand, but it was not a simple contract killing. It was something far more monstrous. Lucien believed the Cheydinhall Sanctuary was compromised by a traitor. The only solution was an ancient rite, the purification. His orders were simple. He was to return to the sanctuary and kill everyone. There could be no survivors.
Ochiva, Vicente Valtieri, Antoinette Marie, Gogron Grobalmag, Talendril, Mirage Dar, and Tainava. All these family members must die.
Lucien gave him a poisoned apple to aid in the slaughter of his own kin. He didn't ask if Whisper would do it. He told him to. It wasn't a question of loyalty to them, but a final test of loyalty to the Brotherhood, to the Night Mother, and to his own nature. Whisper walked out of Fort Farragut and stood on the hillside looking down at Cheydinhall. The sanctuary, his home, was down there. The people who had welcomed him, trained him, shared their dark world with him. They were waiting, completely unaware. Was this a betrayal, Or was this the ultimate expression of what he had become? A final severing of any sentimental tethers, proof that nothing was more sacred than the kill. He held the poisoned apple in his hand. He looked down at the path that led to his family, and he took the first step down. The purification had begun. He's been ordered to destroy the only home he's ever known, to murder his mentors and his friends. All of Cyrodiil is now his hunting ground, but first he has to burn his own nest. What happens when the unstoppable slasher is finally unleashed? Stick around for the next chapter to find out. Subscribe, share the video, and leave a comment if you like what you saw. Until next time, may the Night Mother wrap you in her cold, loving embrace.